I would like to welcome everyone, all the attendees, the authors, the publishers, the editors, and everyone interested, scholars, students, writers, interested parties, everyone here tonight. We apologize for the technical issues that we have. It seems as if the links were sent to different people, and as they joined, it was not coming through. And we have know in some areas we have load shedding as well. So that is something that we can't do anything about. But for us, it's as a school of humanities and as the University of Sol Plaatje, it is really an honor to host this event, to honor the legacy of Sol Plaatje, and also to finally launch the biography of Solomon Tshekisho Plaatje, Morata Baabo, and also the author of this biography, Dr. Modiri Molema. And we welcome his niece especially, Dr. Molema. So we always just hear these names and we see these faces, but to meet somebody, well, this is not in person, but it's the closest that we can be. The original idea was to have this event face to face, but because when we organized this, it was at that stage when things were still very uncertain with COVID regulations, and to be able to have as many people to attend this, we decided to have it online. So this is the closest to the real event that we can come. So very welcome here, and we look forward to meeting our guests, to meeting the panel, and I will, if Dr. Rademacher comes on, he will probably say something more, and welcome you again. But I will also in the end say something. But so I enjoy this evening with us, and we really are very honored to have you as our guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stander. Colleagues, as we wait for Mr. Mokai to join in, I have just put in the chat the link where you can buy the book, as well as the email address where you can send your orders if you don't want to buy online. I have also put in the program. In case you don't have the program, it's also in the chat. So please check that out in the meantime.
Valencia,
any luck?
Yes? Sorry to break you. Sorry to break your word. I'm just gonna go help Mr. Mokai connect quick. So in the meantime, if you can just keep the fourth for me, please.
Okay, no problem. As I was saying, colleagues, the link for the purchase of the book is in the chat box, as well as the email address to purchase the book if you don't want to buy online. I've also attached the program for those who don't have the program yet. Please give us 2 minutes or so for Mr. Mokai to join in so he can read the extract from the book for us. Thank you. Maybe what I can do in the meantime while we wait for Mr. Mokai is just read the biographies, because I had to do that before he spoke. So let me quickly read the biography for Mr. Mokai, who's the editor, as well as the one for the author, the late Dr. Modiri Molema, while we wait for Mr. Mokai to connect. So I'm just quickly going to read the biographies while we wait for them. I will start with Mr. Sabata Mpomokai's biography, and it reads as follows. Okay. Sabata Mpomokai, who is the editor of the biography that we're launching today, is a multiple award-winning author of Setswana novels, Kgake Modisa, Dikeledi, and Moletlo wa Manong, as well as a short biography, The Story of Sol Plaatje. He is an affiliate of the Tsikinya Chaka Center at Wits University, an honorary fellow in writing at the University of Iowa in the US, and he also teaches creative writing in African languages at the Sol Plaatje University in Kimberley. Remokai has also just recently been awarded the PenSalp Multilingualism Award for Language and Literature in Setswana. Congratulations to him on his new achievement. I'm not sure if he can hear me or not. Now on to the author's biography, the late Dr. Setswana Modiri Molema. Dr. Setswana Modiri Molema was born in 1891 in Mahikeng, where he later died in 1965. He was a Scotland-trained medical doctor as well as an ANC secretary and treasurer in the late 1940s and early 1950s. He wrote, among others, The Bantu Past and Present, which is an ethnographical and historical study of the native races of South Africa, as well as Muntsiwa 1815 to 1896, Barolong Chief and Patriot. And that is it on the biographies. Is Mr. Mokai here yet? Curtis?
Valencia, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dr. Stander.
When you're done with the biographies, maybe you can put some pictures of the book and, what the book looks like and the authors. Maybe if you have those pictures, then you maybe can share it with us.
Yes, definitely. I'll start by sharing the pictures of the authors.
Can you hear me? Hello? No.
Hi, Dr. Molema. Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. I was panicking.
How are you?
Fine. Great.
That's good.
Thanks.
I've been seeing your face, but I'm only hearing your voice now. So it's great to hear your voice finally.
Yeah.
I'm just quickly trying to share the pictures. Are the pictures of the author and the editor visible?
Yes, we can
Not
see.
to me. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
You can't see anything, Dr. Molema?
No. But I'm a troglodyte, eh? In
This
these
will assist
IT
you
matters.
shortly. Okay, maybe while we're waiting for Mr. Mokai to join in, Dr. Felix, do you wanna maybe start by introducing the panel members? I'm not sure if they're here yet.
I thought you were going to introduce the panel members, but I don't have a problem introducing them.
Okay.
Shouldn't we wait for them to be here, for the panel to be constituted and present before we
my problem is we have 43 attendees now, and I think some of them might be the panel members, but we just can't see them.
Valencia,
I see Dr. Mguni is here.
Mr. Sabata will join from my laptop.
Okay, must I give him like 2-3 minutes?
No, yeah, he's right next to me.
All right, perfect.
I can't see anything.
Yes, please.
But I'm a troglodyte,
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Resa Batampomokai as he reads the extract from the biography. Ramokai, can you hear me?
Yes, Valencia, I can hear you. Thank you for the platform and apologies for technical glitches.
Okay, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Valencia and colleagues and guests who are here. And so I'm going to read an excerpt from the biography, and I'm reading from the beginning. There's an opening preface written by Dr. Molema himself and titled Naledi. Itli re motlhamongwe batho ba bone naledi nngwe e galalelang e kgabaganya loapi ka bonako go tswa botlhabatsatsi go ya bophirimatsatsi e fatola magodimo ka lesedi e bonesa legodimo le lefatshe mme go sa itsewe gore e simolola fa kae le gore e fetela kae mme re kgatla ka bontle jwa yone e gakgamatse kgotsa e be tshose ka kgalalelo ya yone e fetang kgalalelo ya masedi a mangwe a bosigo. O ne a ntse jalo Solomon Tshekisho Plaatje mo gare ga botshelo jwa barolong ba gabo mme seng bone fela mme le fa a le mo gare ga Batswana botlhe le mo merafeng yotlhe ya bantsho ba mmala ma-India le basweu ba Afrika Borwa mo go bone botlhe o na le motho yo itshupileng ka dineo tsa gagwe tsa kitso le tiro le puo le go kwala moitseanape le morutegi e le setswerere le senatla sa motho yo na sa tlhole e le ngwana wa barolong fela mme jaanong e ne le ngwana wa ditšhaba tsotlhe tsa Afrika. Motho yo ntseng jalo yo gaisang ka mokgwa mongwe batho ba le bantsi ba tle ba rate go itse sengwe ka ga gagwe gore tota ke mang, o tswa kae, o tsetswe ke mang, o rutilwe kae, o tshedile jang, o suleleng, o bolailwe ke eng, bana ba gagwe ke bomang, tumelo ya gagwe e ne le eng. Dipotso tse le tse dingwe tse di tshwanang natso ke tsone tse re tla di arabang mo lokwalong lo. Valencia, I will put a full stop there for now.
Thank you so much. And I think I read your biography in your absence. Sorry. So we just want to congratulate you for your award, your recent award.
Thank
from
you.
the Pen South Multilingualism Award for Language and Literature in Setswana. Congratulations to you on that achievement. And thank you for the reading of the extract.
Thank you.
So next on our agenda is the introduction of the panel. Dr. Aung, it's okay, I will take over. I will do the introduction of the panel members.
Thank you.
Before
Vanessa.
I do that, I'm just quickly going to share the picture of the cover of the book. If I can just... Okay, I hope that's visible. So on our panel today, we have Dr. Felix Aung from SPU, who will be conducting the interviews. We also have Dr. Case Mguni, who is the publisher at Zara Books. We have Resa Bata Mukai, who have just read the extracts, who is the editor of the book. We have Professor Brian Whelan, who is the author of the foreword and a well-known Sol Plaatje biographer. We also have Dr. Liloba Molema, who is also the author of the foreword, as well as the niece to the author, the late Ngaka Modiri Molema. Now I'm going to hand over to Dr. Felix Awung, who will conduct the interviews. Dr. Awung, over to you.
Thank you very much, Valencia. Thank you, everyone, for making time out to be part of this session this evening. A special welcome to our panelists, who are household names, who do not really need any further introduction. And I feel really honored to sit down with them this evening for this discussion on this monumental publication. Before I start, I do not see Professor Whelan. Is he with us?
Felix, Professor Whelan has been struggling to connect. I think he's still struggling to connect with us.
That's unfortunate. We can start with the discussion. I mean, when he joins us, I think he'll pick up from there. And if there is any question that only he could answer, I don't know. But I'm sure if there is any question, the other members of the panel can jointly answer, because I know they're well versed in the life and works of Sol Plaatje, and also scholars of Sol Plaatje's biography. My first question will go to Dr. Mguni. My question is, I mean, we are told that this Setswana biography was first submitted to the publishers in 1965 and has been lying in the archives for the whole 52 years. So the question is, what was the motivation to publish it this time around? Dr. Mguni?
You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, Dr. Mguni,
Yes,
can hear
yes.
you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for hosting this wonderful event. And thank you for the question. From our philosophy, African stories do not die. So even if the book was written 55 years ago, it is still green for us. It is still a story that needs to be read, a story that needs to be told, and for generations to come. So it was something that was exciting when Sabata Mukai approached us with this idea of publishing this story that had been written that long ago. So it's very much in line with our strategy for reviving the African story and keeping it alive. So it's something that naturally falls within the strategy of Zara Books. And not only because it's an African story, but also particularly because it's a story told in an African language. And also that is something that we really think we need to strengthen, that African stories, African history, African biographies should be made and told in their original form as much as possible. Because as we translate these things, some things do get lost. So it is something that we really welcome, and it's something that is really great. As part of the preparation for this publication, Mr. Mukai and I took a trip to visit the family members of Modiri Molema and Sol Plaatje, and that alone was very revealing and very amazing. So I think maybe I'll just stop there, but it's very much in line with what we really do. Thank you, Dr. Aung.
Thank you very much. There is a follow-up question that I would like to ask Sabata. Dr. Mguli just indicated that you approach them for this work to be published. And what I think would like to know is when did you come across this particular biography that was written by Dr. Molema 52 years ago, and why did you choose Zara Books? Why not any other publisher?
Aung for the question. So I became aware of the manuscript around 15 or so years ago, and I had heard about it or read about it from Professor Williams' first biography of Sol Plaatje, which came out in the 1980s. And then I think it was in 2008, 2009, I visited Sol Plaatje's late grandson now, who's named after him, Solomon Molema, in Mahikeng, who also told me that, yes, the manuscript is there, it exists, and it has been safely kept at Wits University. So for all these years that I have been concerned with Sol Plaatje's work, I have been worried about it because I've been thinking, when you write a book, you write it to be read. You don't write it so that it stays in the archives. And my worry was that Dr. Molema wrote this book, submitted it to publishers, and passed away shortly after that. He passed away in 1965, shortly after he had submitted it to Botswana Book Center. And so he has not seen it come to life, being transformed from manuscript to a book. As somebody who has done so much for us, I mean, Valencia read his bio, and you can figure out how much work he has done for us, and to honor that person. The best way to honor him is to get the work that he has done be available, the work that he has written be available to the people he wrote it for. In 2012, this book it came out in English. It had been translated by Professors Karen Hare and Sikepe Machile, and that was quite important. However, I felt that it needed to come out in the language in which it was written. And so when you look around, when you look at publishers in South Africa, there are not many publishers who warm to the idea of publishing in African languages. There are very few of them, and Shara Books was one of them, one of those very, very few. And I have known Dr. Mguni for a long time, and it was very easy to approach him and say to him, here's a manuscript that worries me. It's been in Wits archives forever, and it has to come out. Do you think through your publishing house you can invest resources into it, and so that we can see it become a book? And he agreed. So the motivation largely, Dr. Aung, was that the book was not written to stay in the archives. It was written to be read. Until now, it has been accessed only by scholars, people who go to these archives through a collection called Molema Papers, and they find it and they make references to it, and that's the end of it. So I think this is a historic moment, and I'm really hoping that Dr. Molema, where he is, he's watching down on us with pride, with his broad smile on his face, because eventually that book is seeing the light of the day.
Thank you very much. I mean, quite impressive stuff that you have done to make sure that this publication comes to light. My next question again is to you, Sabata, and it has to do with the language of the book, of the biography. In the 60s, when this biography was written, there were disagreements regarding Setswana orthography. We now have standardized Setswana. What has the process been like to bring Molema's work to today's language?
Well, it has been very interesting. There are terms that Dr. Molema used that we needed to double check. We needed to go into the archives and figure out what is it that he was saying here. He translated almost everything, including names of places and so on. Bulawayo in Zimbabwe, he called it Bolawani in Setswana. And some terms that we are using now were used differently at that time. For instance, when we refer to the English people in Setswana, we say Maisemani or Manyisemani. However, he used the term Maengelese, which directly means English-speaking people. And so we had to work through that, understand first and foremost what is it that he was saying, understand these terms, and ask ourselves, if we keep this terminology, will people understand what is it that he was writing, or are there terms that need to be brought to today's Setswana, standardized Setswana? So the process has been interesting in that sense. We have learned a lot. And also, Dr. Molema was a Morolong. So he was not just a Motswana, he was a Morolong who wrote in Serolong, which is one of the largest dialects in Setswana today. However beautiful Serolong is, and I wish we had just left his Serolong intact. There is, unfortunately, standardized Setswana that cuts across all regions of Setswana in Southern Africa, and so we had to bring the book there. But it's been very interesting to move from that Serolong dialect to standardized Setswana. But the beginning of the process was understanding clearly what is it that he wanted to say. Also, there's a beauty in how he tells the story that we did not want to diminish. We did not want to interfere with that beauty. I mean, this is the only person who wrote a biography of Sol Plaatje who has lived with him, who knew him personally, who says, I met Sol Plaatje when I was 7 years old and he was 22, and I liked him. And so a story that is told from the beginning in that way is really told beautifully. It's told, Dr. Molema does not intend to be objective. He has written about somebody he admired completely, somebody he wanted to be like. Hence, Sol Plaatje became his mentor. And his language gears towards that. And we didn't want to become traditional academics who are trying to be objective in terms of language use. We needed to leave him with his language, beautiful as it is, just bring Serolong to standardized Setswana.
Thank you very much, Sabata. Now, still on the language that he used, did you discover any terminology that is no longer in use that you wish, I mean, as a Setswana scholar yourself, that you wish we should have preserved?
Yes, there are, especially when it comes to the translation of names of places. I wish we had kept that. I wish Botswana or Setswana-speaking South Africans or Southern Africans could still refer to Bulawayo in Zimbabwe as Bolawani, because even the use of that translated name tells us a lot about the relationship between Setswana-speaking people and that part of the world. And so these are things that you wish could not be lost. in the process. Unfortunately, we have. So it is just one of those examples of the terminology that I think we're supposed to have carried through up to now.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question would have gone to Professor Whelan, but I'm sure, Sabatha already mentioned something in that light, and I'm sure between the three of you, you can answer a question. And the question has to do with the relationship between the author, Dr. Molema, and Sol Plaatje. When did they meet, and under which circumstances did they meet for the first time?
Sol Plaatje, in his early 20s, accepted an offer to work as an interpreter at the Magistrates Court in Mahikeng, where Dr. Molema was born and lived. And that was in 1898. So upon arrival in Mahikeng, he was accommodated by Silas Molema, Dr. Modiri Molema's father. And that's when they met. Dr. Modiri Molema was 7, Sol Plaatje was 22. And because he admired Sol Plaatje was his role model, there are many things that he did that were done by Sol Plaatje first. I speak under correction that he was introduced to ANC politics through his interactions with Sol Plaatje, attending meetings with Sol Plaatje, because in the 1940s, late 40s and early 50s, he occupied positions of treasurer and secretary of the ANC. But also, when he was writing his first book, The Bantu Past and Present, he was at medical school in Glasgow, Scotland, and Sol Plaatje was at that time in London, England. And Sol Plaatje held him by his hand as he worked on his first book until it came out as such an important book. So that was their relationship. They were together so many times. In the book itself, Molema refers to the meetings that he attended with Sol Plaatje that were relating to issues of land and so forth in South Africa. And he talks about how he admired how Plaatje reasoned and how everybody listened to Plaatje. So their relationship was the relationship that one could say was a mentor and mentee relationship, but was also elder brother and younger brother type of a relationship. Molema was with Plaatje until Plaatje got buried in Kimberley. That was the last day he parted ways with Sol Plaatje, after meeting him when he was 7 years old. So it was a very long relationship of the author knowing his subject. And I think that is also what compelled him to write about him, because he had known him so much.
Thank you very much. Fascinating, really fascinating. My next question will go to Dr. Leloba Molema. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you. I can't see you. I don't know what's happening here, but at least I can hear you, yes.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We know Modiri Molema, the pioneering medical doctor, the biographer, the ANC secretary and treasurer. Who was this man, apart from the public figure that we read about?
Yeah. Who was he? He was my father's eldest brother. Is that an answer? My uncle.
Okay.
Yeah, and yes, went to school in the Eastern Cape, Hilltown, and Lovedale. Scottish Presbyterian schools. They also had the University of Fort Hare. Before, in 1959, it was taken over by the Boer government, Separate Universities Act. Yeah, and he went to study medicine in Scotland probably because the schools he went to were Scottish Presbyterian mission schools. Yeah, very recently, there was a building at the University of Glasgow, I think 2 months ago, that has been named after him. Yeah, in honor of his work, and I guess in recognition of being an ex-student who, well, made it, I guess, in life, in his career. Shula Marx, who is at the School of African and Oriental Studies, writes about him in her book called Divided Sisterhood, I think published in 1990. And she talks there about an incident that we heard only as children at the time, from our parents, not quite at the time. Yeah, that he could, in those days, he could send his patients to the hospital in Mahikeng, Victoria Hospital. And the white nurses there refused to work under him because he was black. And he sued them successfully. And the white people in Mahikeng collected money in order to pay for this fine. So these are some of the stories that were swirling around when we were growing up, being told by our parents. I write also in part of the forward that another story was that he was kidnapped by some young Boers who drove off with him and stripped him naked, drove off in his car, and there was a car following their car, stripped him naked and took the car keys, and threw them away through the window of their getaway car. Yeah. So those kinds of humiliations, and of course, when the I don't know what the name of the act is, I've forgotten momentarily. Yeah, okay, Group Areas Act. When the Group Areas Act was passed in the 1950s, he had to leave his surgery in town, which was in town, and had to go to a blacks-only area at great loss, of course, and no compensation. And he set up this surgery, Kostateng in Mahikeng. Yeah. So those are some of the stories about him that we learned as children from our parents. And as for us, he has always been interested in our education. And we used to gather at his place and our Auntie Lucretia's place, his wife, every year during the school holidays, and we performed to our parents all that we had learned that year at school. And I give some examples of this in the bit that I wrote for Morata Baabo. Yeah, that was the sort of person he was. My memory of him was that he was a very strict man, Victorian type, patriarch, who took his patriarchal duties seriously. Yeah, and even though he was just our uncle, we got to know him. Almost as well as we knew our own parents. Yeah. Is that okay? Shall I continue?
That's great. That's great. Yeah, if you have more things, just
Yeah.
you keep going.
Of course, that is like his family, you know, things other than his professional life as a doctor and his political activities as a member of the ANC treasurer at one stage, and also, as Sabata said, Secretary General at the time when James Moroka was the president of the ANC. Yeah. They were also our parents, including our uncle. They were staunch Christians of the Calvinist type, you know. Yeah, very strict and very. Solomon Plaatje, I think, was like that too. Very conscientious in what they did. Yeah, taught by the Scottish missionaries. Yeah, that by being active and doing your work well is a reward that will also see you into heaven. According to Max Weber, for example, the Protestant ethic. That's how they lived their lives, I think.
Okay, Dr. Molema, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's really some new things that we are learning about the author. To round off this discussion, I will have just one last question for Dr. Mnguni and Sabata. I mean, this launch is to promote this work and make sure that it is known and read. Are there any other plans to make sure that the work is promoted beyond this launch today? Not just because, first because it's a biography of Sol Plaatje, and secondly because it is written in Setswana, and we do believe that promoting readership in African languages is a worthy endeavor. So do you have any plans in place to make sure that the promotion of this work is done beyond this launch?
Dr. Wong, yes, we have plans to promote not just this biography beyond this launch, but work written in African languages, especially when you consider that this year marks 60 years since a very important conference took place in June at Makerere in Uganda. There was Conference of African Writers of English Expression, which problematized African literature because it created a sense that what is literature in Africa has to be in English. Hence, even the name of the conference was Conference of African Writers of English Expression. And one could even argue that it had set the tone for the contempt of literature written in African languages. So, as scholars right now in 2022, we have the responsibility to reverse that, because we have realized that languages are not just means to communicate, but languages are ways of seeing, are ways of knowing, are ways of interpreting, are bodies of knowledge themselves. And when you leave a language, you are dumping a whole archive of peoples of that language. And so it is important that we go beyond this biography. This biography will obviously be launched in Mahikeng because that is the natural home of this book. The author comes from there, in Johannesburg and wherever. But beyond this biography, some of us will still be putting in a lot of hours into bringing out works written in African languages.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabata. Once more, Sabata, thank you very much for your input and your presence. Dr. Molema, thank you very much for the fancy information that you gave us about the author. And thank you for making time out to be with us today. Valencia, thank you. And
Thank you.
moving to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wong, and thank you to the panelists for answering all the questions. I am now going to open the floor to the attendees to ask questions or make comments if there's any. So if you have any question, please put it in the Q&A box. Or you can just raise up your hand and I will pick you. So please, if you have any questions or comments, please write it in the chat box, or you can raise up your hand and go ahead and ask your question. Okay, there's no questions in the Q&A box at the moment, so I'm just going to give the attendees a bit of time. Dr. Mguni is back.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Mguni, yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, the technology is our God these days, so it determines who speaks and who doesn't.
Yes. Would you like
so
to
what I
answer
wanted
the
to add, yes, yeah, I wanted to add to what Sabata was saying. So firstly, the decision to launch it with to go into partnership with Sol Plaatje University was because of the natural fit between the two, the author and the institution. And we wanted it to be on the 19th, actually. That was our target, because that is the date of his passing. So that would have been the 90th anniversary of his passing. Unfortunately, that day, I think, was it would have been unsuitable for one reason or the other. So in any case, we are happy to do it this way. The other thing that I wanted to underline is that we deliberately wanted to design a book that is not an academic book, but that has got an appeal beyond academia. So even you see from the book design that it is actually made to be accessible. The pictures that we put in there, we tried to keep it as interesting as any book, any trade book would be. So the idea is to take it out there and launch it. We think that it's actually a great book to reinforce or to champion African languages as a way of telling African stories. So we really have quite a few ambitious plans in terms of taking it forward. I think our next launch is supposed to be at the Market Theatre, but it is yet to be in Johannesburg. It is yet to be confirmed. But we do want to take it into other countries as well, and neighboring countries like Botswana, where, of course, there is relevance for the book and the story. So yes, there will be much more that we announce as we firm up these plans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mguni. Much appreciated. Okay, I made a mistake by saying people can raise up their hands, because unfortunately I cannot see any hands from the attendees. So if you have a question, please post it in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and I will read it out for you. So if you have any question or comment, please just post it in the chat and we will take it from there. Thank you. I'm not sure, Curtis, are you able to see if people are raising their hands or not? Because I can't on my side.
I don't have a picture at all, but I can hear you well. So I'd be grateful if you read out the questions.
I will definitely do that, Dr. Molema, as soon as they come through.
Okay.
Valencia, there has been no questions thus far.
Are you
And-
able to see hands or not?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. So we'll just wait for people to post in the chat then. Should we give it 5 minutes? Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Valencia, I see a question from Dr. Kia in the question and answer.
Oh, yes.
I think
Thank
if
you, Dr.
click
Stander.
on the new, yeah.
Yes, there's a question from Dr. Kia, and it goes, how long did it take you to write the book? Maybe I missed it. I think this one goes to, I'm not sure if Remokai can answer this.
Who, me?
Sorry, Dr. Mokai, you muted.
Yeah, okay.
Remokai, you muted, sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes. Maybe, I mean, I'm the editor of the book, and the author is Dr. Molema, but we have a sense that it took him a couple of years, not many years though, but he did travel to ask other family members about Sol Plaatje, things that he may not have remembered, things that he may not have known. So we can say it took him a couple of years. As for the editing, it took us a couple of months to work through this, and I had on my side, a very able proofreader who was not just a proofreader, but in essence, a co-editor, one could say that, novelist Tuelo Gabonewe, who, took a comb and went through the text and would send me 5-10 questions a day as he was working through this. So it took us a bit of time, but it was worth every minute spent on it.
Thank you, Remokai. There's another question that came through, and it says, approximately a decade ago, I would like to know what the main reason why the manuscript were not recognized. Wait, this is from Lesego Motlhankane.
I don't know. It may have to do with the publishing industry in South Africa. The appetite to publish in African languages has not been great. As I mentioned in the beginning, that Shara Books is one of the very few publishers who are publishing in African languages for the general reader. Most of the publishers who are publishing in African languages do so for schools, because one could say it's the economy that is driving them that way. And so perhaps people who came across the book or the manuscript before me did not know where to take it to. The original publisher who received it probably did not have a lot of funds. I mean, this was in 1965. This was Botswana Book Center, ran by Reverend Jones, did not have a lot of resources at that time. But about a decade ago, when it came out in English, the expectation, at least from my side, was that somebody other than me was going to pick up the manuscript, the original Setswana manuscript, edit it and bring it to life. And I waited until I couldn't wait anymore and had to do it.
Can I add to that? I'd like to add to that. This is a problem that faced Modiri Molema in 1965. It also faced the post-independence African writers, people like Chinua Achebe, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who wrote in English, and also only later For example, Ngugi began to write in his native language, Gikuyu. It's also a problem, for example, that faced Afrikaner writers like Andre Brink, writing in Afrikaans, and he translated, for example, his book Kennis van die Aand into English, probably rewrote it in English. And the reason for this, I think, is because English is a world language, and we know by what means it became a world language, through empire. So what it means is that if you publish in English, you reach a much wider audience than when you publish in just your own language, Setswana, for example, or of course it doesn't mean that it is not important to do so, right? Yeah. So it's the market. Part explanation is that the English reading public is much wider, much wider than the market based only on native speakers of the language. And in our case, native speakers were in any case disadvantaged by Bantu education in the 1950s. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Molema. Thank you, Remukai. We have another question from Mpho Modisakeng, and it goes, how can we take this work and other works which were done by Remukai to be more accessible to the youth and the Batswana in all the areas? Sorry, Remukai, you are muted once again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question, please? Sorry.
Okay, Dr. Molema, the question goes, how can we take this work and other works which were done by Remukai to be more accessible to the youth and the Batswana in all the areas?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, let me attempt to answer Remo Disakeng. It begins with us firstly acknowledging the importance of our languages, that they carry so much. And for as long as people do not believe that their languages are important, for as long as people do not believe that they can benefit from that particular way of seeing, particular way of knowing which a language is, they will not do much about it. So I think that is the beginning. But secondly, I would not like to be negative. There are a lot of good things that are happening in relation to African language literature. In South Africa, at least I can speak for South Africa now, there are more people who are showing the desire to have their works translated into African languages. I worked with a team under Professor Shole, translating Fred Khumalo's Dancing the Death Drill into Setswana. And it's not just Fred Khumalo, it's many other people who have shown that interest in getting their works translated into African languages. And these works, we see them now in bookshops. Unlike before, you could go to a bookshop and only find works in English followed by Afrikaans. We see them in bookshops, people buying them to read at home, not just at school. So that is something positive that is happening. The fact that a writer of this generation, in this case myself, have work that is taught at universities such as Northwest University has been taught for a number of years, 7, 8 years or so. It means something. It means something positive is happening in regard to African language literature right now. What we need to do, I think, is to put in more effort into publicizing this work, into making it accessible. Have our publishers knowing that their work does not end on the day when the book is launched, but after that as well, make it accessible. There are still many areas where people speak African languages where there are no bookshops. We need to think of ways to get our books there. So I think the beginning, as I said, is acknowledging the importance of the language first and the importance of the literature in that language. And then once you have acknowledged that, you can do other things to move it forward.
There's a follow-up question to that, and it goes, was there an epiphany through editing on both the lives of Dr. Molema and that of Sol Plaatje?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, the follow-up question says, was there an epiphany through editing on both the lives of Dr. Molema and that of Sol Plaatje?
I mean, I worked on Molema's book, which he wrote about Sol Plaatje. I haven't edited Sol Plaatje's own work, but I could say that it wasn't easy work, but it was important work. I cannot make clear comparisons. Yeah, that's my attempt.
Okay. Thank you, Remukai. We have another question from Lesego Motlanke again, and it goes, I wonder if apartheid played a major role in the absence of respect for the author, or if the quality of his writings wasn't enough for the author to be taken seriously. Must I repeat again?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there was no question, there's still no question about the quality of Molema's work or his writing. It was merely a question of the market.
Mm-hmm.
Publishers invest their money where they believe they will get return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what has been happening throughout the time until you come across publishers who are saying, out of the 10 books that I will publish this year, I will include one that will not necessarily make a lot of money for me. I will include one that I am publishing because it has to be published, not just because it will bring in money. So I think it was, to a large extent, a question of publishers wanting to put their money where they're going to get the returns. But the quality of his writing is great. I mean, he has written acclaimed books before, The Bantu Past and Present and biographies of Munsiwa and Morata, well written. So the quality of his writing is good. And I still think that it was important that he had written this in Sirolong, and that at some point when we have reached a level where we are allowing for diversity even within one language such as Setswana, and start publishing in Sirolong, Sekhatla, and so forth, because people who speak those dialects are many, will be able to bring out this biography in the dialect in which it was written.
Can I add to that? Modiri Molema, in fact, notes in the English translation of Morata Baabo, he notes about Plaatje that much of what Plaatje wrote in Setswana was not published because publishers are concerned with markets. And yes, and I would agree with Sabata that is the case. And also with the writers of the 1960s, the first writers to emerge after Africa became the first African countries to become independent.
Thank
So
you, Dr.
not so
Molema.
much a matter of quality, but a matter of markets.
Okay. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. Is there any more questions from the attendees or from the colleagues? before we move on to the next item?
Yes, Valencia. I don't know how to make it a question or a comment. I pick up a couple of things that Sabata said and Dr. Molema as well regarding publishers and money, or publishers and the promotion of a particular ideology. And Sabata talked about people not wanting to write in indigenous languages and preferring to write in English, or publishers preferring to publish in English. I usually frame it as a conflict between economic empowerment and identity. So write in, or we should consume literature produced in our indigenous languages. And on the other side, people are thinking of economic empowerment, that English brings that economic empowerment. Sabata, have you ever thought of what could be done to actually transform African languages into mechanisms of economic empowerment? Because I think if we could arrive at that stage, then most of the problems we are talking about that you have raised today would be taken care of.
Sure. Felix, I think it begins with investment by the relevant authorities. One has to applaud attempts that are made by government agencies in South Africa to invest in these languages, but also it's about getting these books accessible. I said that we are able to go into bookshops and find books in African languages, but there are still very few. If you go into the only bookshop in Kimberley, in a mall in Kimberley, there are only 2 non-English, non-Africans books or authors you're going to find there. It's Tuelo Gabonewe and Sabat Ampomokai, and that is very unfair. It talks to sellers of books who do not believe that books in these languages can sell. But when you look at the numbers, Felix, the numbers are telling us something. We have over 4.5 million people in South Africa to whom Setswana is home language. That's a very large number. That is more than the population of Botswana, of Lesotho, and Iceland put together. That's more than 3 countries put together. That is very large. So the important thing is for us to make this work accessible. People will still ask us as the authors, where do I find your work? And they do not struggle to find works written by my friends, Nick Mhlongo, Spio Mahala, and so on, because they know you go to any bookstore in Johannesburg, in Durban, Cape Town, they will find it. So I think it's a question of making the work accessible, but also publishers who do not overprice books. We need to acknowledge the fact that some people who have to read our books may not afford them because they are too pricey. This book, I think it goes for 200 or 220. Many biographies don't go for under 300 rand unless they are 10 years old or so. So it's also about the price, the affordability and accessibility of these works, and also about the authors, the creators of this work becoming very visible instead of sitting at the corner, having a little conference in Mahikeng or in Kimberley and complaining and then not appearing anywhere else.
Yes, that's a very good one. And a follow-up, have you ever thought of translation as a way of resolving the debacle? In other words, you write in Setswana, and that in itself takes care of the identity side. Then you get the work translated into English, so that it takes care of the economic side. Because you did mention that many people are getting their works translated into Setswana. But what is unfortunate is that when you get works translated from English into indigenous languages, you are kind of, it's my view, continuing the colonial heritage. And there is what I usually call reverse form of colonization, which means we should now produce indigenous language and get it translated into global languages so that we can also promote our identity on the global stage. So do you think translation could be a solution to some of the issues you've raised here?
Yeah, I think translation could be the solution. I mean, so Professor Lesego Malepe, who is in the audience somewhere here, in Boston, Massachusetts, in the USA, has translated my first 2 Setswana novels into English. And while she's still looking for the publisher, that act of her investing years in translating these works into English is quite important. It will give my work a broader audience. But also, I think we need translations between African languages. African languages that are spoken by many millions of people. Sizulu, for instance, in South Africa, maybe approximately 20 million people in this country regard Sizulu as home language. And so if a bestseller in South Africa is selling 3,000 or 3,500 books, if that book is available in Sizulu, I'm quite sure that a bestseller in that language would go to hundreds of thousands if the book is really accessible to them and they find themselves in the stories they are reading, not stories where they see people they don't know, but they see themselves, their circumstances, their history, their aspirations, their fears, and so forth. So I think translation between African languages, especially African languages that have a much broader reach, Kiswahili, for instance, in Sizulu. These are languages that are spoken by millions and millions of people, apart from just translating into European languages. So I think languages like Sizulu have a much greater chance of having art in that language surviving solely on patronage, on the sales of books or films, or whatever, without much depending on funding to keep it afloat, because the numbers are high.
Thank you, Dr. Felix, for the question. Thank you, Remukai, for the response. I have a few more questions directed to Remukai. One of them is from Karabo. And it goes, hello, colleagues. I would like to ask Remukai if African languages, Setswana in particular, are in a state or position to be used as a scholastic and scientific language, not only being used for linguistic and literature purposes, but for various themes within a society.
Thanks for that question, Karabo. I believe that we can go beyond just writing stories and films and songs in African languages. But it starts with the writing of stories, because when we do that, we give these languages the opportunity to grow without them being written down. In stories, in films, and so on, we do not develop new terminology. We do not develop new word, a Setswana word for laptop, for Facebook, for Twitter. As technology advances, we do not have that. And it is only once we have started with creating the literature that creates this terminology in the process that we can now say, well, we can now begin to teach life sciences or chemistry in Setswana. But I think we can. We just need to invest in writing these languages, invest in the lexicography of these languages. It is good that we have now a few monolingual dictionaries in Setswana. They are taking us somewhere. And I think I saw a dictionary, a geography textbook somewhere in Setswana as well. So that shows that what Karabo is asking can actually be done, but it needs more effort in us writing in the languages, using those languages, creating the terminology as we go.
Thank you, Ramka. There's another question. I think it came from the comment that you had made earlier on. I hope it's going to make sense. It's from Wayne Young, and it goes, can Sabata shortly review how he said he could not translate things exactly? I think like a town's name or something like that.
Okay. So I can, and we could have used Molema's translations of names of organizations, names of people, names of places. But the concern was that maybe people would not know who these people are. Sol Plaatje referred to William Shakespeare's Tshekisho. This we can use perhaps, at a later stage, we can, put a glossary at the back, but we didn't think at this point it was very important. So we just told the story. We brought the language to today's. Those translations are still preserved. We just did not use them because we didn't think that people were going to know what is it that he was referring to.
Thank you, Remukai. I cannot currently see any questions in the chat box. Sorry, I don't know if I missed anything. I hope I didn't. So I think we can now move on to the next item, which is the announcements. There isn't really announcements. Like I mentioned in the beginning, that I have put in the chat box the link to the purchasing of the book, as well as the email address where people can send their emails if they want to order the book. And the program was also there. Now we can move on to the last item, which is the closing remarks from Dr. Stander, which is the head of department in the Department of Languages. Dr. Stander?
Yes, thank you, colleagues. And once again, thank you for everyone for attending. First of all, I would like to congratulate the authors, the editors, and publishers with this excellent and highly valuable piece of art and history. This is a long-awaited and necessary project. What an honor for us at Sol Plaatje to present this in the form of the launch of the Setswana biography of Solomon Tshekisho, sorry, I pronounce it incorrectly, Plaatje, Morata Baabo. Hereby, we honor the name of Sol Plaatje and the author of his biography, Dr. Modiri Molema. The questions that the audience raised, and I was thinking of answering that, but I thought I would leave it for this last comment, is that the new language policy that is going to be implemented at SPU promotes multilingualism and local languages. And what we have seen today is a step in the right direction to ensure that this policy will be one that will be properly implemented. And we hope that by encouraging multilingualism and local languages, we will also encourage young writers to write in their own languages.
Mm-hmm.
And with this being said, I would like to thank you all, one and everyone, but especially the following persons. Jara Books for making this event possible, for publishing this and releasing and launching this book. To SPU and the SBU Communications Department for the marketing and communications, to the School of Humanities for organizing the event, to Dr. Rademeyer, who could not really be connecting to us. He had problems, but I see he's still on the online. He's still on the chat. So thank you for his presence. To the editor, Mr. Sabata Mukai, for reading the extract. To Dr. Felix Awung and the panel members, the publishers of Zara Books, the editor, and I hope Prof. Willen was able to connect with us. We haven't seen him, but we hope he was present. And also a very big thank you to Dr. Leloba Molema, a niece and author of the foreword, who wrote the foreword in the book. It's nice to meet you, although not in person and a face-to-face presence, but online presence. And these are the times we are living in. So, but it was nice to meet you as well. And to the public for attending and participating, and Ms. Valencia Wagner for facilitating the book launch so well. You have all done an excellent job. And last but not least, to Mr. Curtis Jeevan as the program producer for working so hard behind the scenes and helping us make this possible. So without your contributions, this would not have been possible. So thanks once again for joining us. Please, as a last comment, look at the link where you can buy the ebook from, and Ms. Valencia Wagner has posted it on the chat. So if you have missed that, please contact us and we can send you the link again. So thanks again to everyone and have a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Goodbye.
Stander, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And maybe we can close this with a comment from Anonymous, which goes, let's teach Setswana into English countries, make Setswana an international language. So we should make sure that the book be available to the blind and vision impaired. Pleasure to see work from former Professor Dr. Molema. Kind regards from Anonymous. Thank you everybody for joining us and good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.